In this video I'm going to talk about the Prague Metro a little bit because I'm going to review a new simulator for it. So there are the lines A, B, and C, or green, yellow, and red. The red is actually the oldest one, even though it's line C. And those are the original engineers who proposed the line, List and Balata. That marker is at the entrance to the A line in Museum. And there is one of the trains of the C line, the Siemens N1. That's the only class they use. And this is the 8171 class used on the rest of the metro system, which is descended from the original A line trains and B line trains also in the late 70s. And there's the depot in Nemocnica Motol, which is the newest station on the system. And this is the website of the company that developed the new simulator. You can see them demonstrating the simulator they've also built for a piece of the New York City MTA. I'm not 100% fond of their inclusion of graffiti in it, but it seems to be slightly more sophisticated than the Prague Metro simulator. Maybe they spent a little bit more time on it. I'm particularly interested with the tools they used, which are really, really basic. Basically SketchUp, GIMP, and Unity, and PSPad for coding. So very, very basic stuff. And they produced this pretty good result, I think. I'm really happy with this. They didn't say how they did the sound, but I would assume probably Audacity or something similar, like what I'm using here. And anyway, they're showing the Android version of the New York City subway, MTA simulator there. And they're working on a simulator for the whole Prague transit system, which will include presumably the C and B lines, because their metro simulator only does the A line. They've also done an Oron Trains version of line C, but it's only for 2010 and later, so I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to play that through for you, if I'm going to do it at all. And then they have related websites, like you can get the dependencies for Oron Trains here, which is something that I'm already turned off by, actually. I'm marking the spot, as you can see there, but I don't like the way people develop Oron Trains layouts and then rely on other people for the dependencies, which then turn out not to exist. But this is their YouTube channel, showing some of the older trailers they've done, and they've got a Facebook page, which is much more up to date. It looks very promising, actually. I assume these screenshots are from the new all-inclusive Prague Transit Simulator, and that presumably is also... I don't recognize that station right offhand. I think that might be Prosek, possibly, but don't quote me. It's very nice anyway. I like the model. And also, just as surprising that they did that in SketchUp, because I've always found SketchUp a little bit hard to use. And then they have, links to their YouTube videos on the Google Plus here. And that's basically it for them. I'm going to demonstrate their simulator now. The first menu, of course, is the language menu. So the English version is only just barely an English version because it's a Czech simulator. Much of the terminology is Czech, the signage is Czech, and so on. And there's also this music, which I had to edit back in because when I did the playthrough, it malfunctioned the first time. I don't really know whether it belongs there. I guess that they figured they had to add it to make their game marketable. Because it is sort of a game. It's limited in a lot of ways, as you'll see. Although, I actually quite like it. I'm very fond of this. I think they did a really good job on it. You actually drive an 8171M class, which is an upgraded Metro Wagenmasch 8171. The rebuild would have been done by Skoda in the 90s and 2000s. And you have a choice of stations, as you can see here, even if you don't really have a choice of lines yet. So to shorten the playthrough, I made it Skalka to Devicka, which was the version of the Line A which ran from 1990 to 2015. With the exception of Depot Horstvarsh, of course. Today it runs Horstvarsh too. Nemocnice. So there I am sitting in Skalka, and as you can see, I can take the CCTV view to see the whole train. In real life, I suppose you'd use your mirror, because the mirror in real life would obviously be more useful than the nevertheless simulated mirror in the game. And there are authentic announcements, as you'll see in a minute. There we are. And then the controls are very simplified because it's an Android game and they want you to be able to play it on your tablet or your smartphone. However, those controls on the control deck actually work to the extent that they're simulated. So the throttle actually works, the brake actually works, and even the door switch actually works. Here I had to relearn how to drive a stopping train, actually, because I've been very busy with a lot of things, haven't had the time for a lot of gaming, especially not train simulators, and so I'm way out of practice. Took me a bunch of tries to get this right. Here I'm driving fairly conservatively. Those lights in the tunnels, incidentally, don't work. In real life, you would use them in the wee hours of the morning for the work crews, but when you operate the simulator I've found in the wee hours of the morning, they don't switch on. And also, nighttime operations do not make the one outdoor scene a nighttime scene, namely the line between the depot host of our station and the tunnel to Skalka, which I'm not including here. All these stations are authentically modeled. I've been very impressed with what the modelers did with it. Although the curves don't appear to have been modeled. It appears that they've modeled the whole thing as a straight line. Maybe figuring that when you're in a tunnel you can't tell anyway. There have been a number of shortcuts beyond the lack of nighttime changes. Those AI passengers, though, will get on the train. It's just that they're not animated properly. Throughout this simulator, you can see where they took shortcuts also, I think, to deal with the fact they were developing for Android. So you can see, if you look carefully at the train, you can see the model is fairly crude and it's more reliant on its textures for its realism. But I still really like it. I think that they did a spectacular job on this, especially given the amount of photography they would have had to do to get all these textures. In general, it just seems like really, really good work. And the sound is the best part. The only part where the sound is flaky is that the station announcements north of Davitska had to be thrown together ad hoc, because my sense is they were working on this as that line was being constructed, and so they didn't get a complete set of recordings. But south of Davitska, the sound is really exactly like the real thing. It couldn't possibly be any better, I don't think. If you listen very carefully, you can see how it, or you can hear how it's looped, but that's true of almost any train simulator. I've never had one where that wasn't the case. So here, I'm continuing on. As with any simulation or real-life operation of a stopping train, your main challenge is calculating your stopping distances. These trains in real life and in the simulator rely very heavily on regenerative braking, so that they don't operate in quite the same way as Westinghouse brakes. So I was thrown a little bit by that too. I'm much more familiar with automatic brakes than regeneratives. So here I'm kind of pumping it, which you're really not supposed to do. And in almost every one of these stops, I had to make more than one application. It shows my lack of experience. This is Zhelovskeho. This is one of the older stations from the 80s. And you see the standardized metal tiles that the station is made out of, which some tourists call the cheese. And they continued using those until at least the C-line extension to Ladvi around 2004.